So this is a quick introduction to importing and cleaning data in Excel. And in particular, if you have a large data set and some ways that you need to kind of handle this. So first I want to talk about what the data set is that we have here. This is wine reviews. This is posted on Kaggle if you're not familiar with Kaggle. It's just a repository of a bunch of data from users that users can submit. And this is data that this user, Zach Tout, it looks like, scraped from winemag.com, which is wine enthusiasts website for wine reviews. And it's 130,000 reviews of different wines from around the world from their wine reviewers here. So when I just download the file, it's a CSV, a comma separated value, that's going to come up later, file, and I open it in Excel. This is what I look at. And as I just kind of scan across this, I notice that there's some funny things going on with some of the characters. And it seems like there's something that's just not right here. This has to do with what we call text encoding. So you can imagine that if we had text in Chinese characters or some other very foreign language with different characters than what we have here, if we tried to open it, then something very strange would happen. And this has to do with the text encoding. So what's happening here is that even though most of these characters are just the same as what we have in English and in the United States, there are some characters that should show up here. So you might see this name of this reviewer that should probably be O'Keefe with kind of an apostrophe, but it doesn't recognize that character, and so it just sort of throws a whole bunch of random characters in there. And so we need to import this data in the right way. So that's the first thing that I want to do. I want to make sure that the data just gets imported the right way. There are a couple ways to handle this, but if we want to just work within Excel, one way that we can do this is if we come up to data and we want to pull our data from text. So rather than just double clicking and opening the file from my file browser, I'm going to bring this in from text, and I'm going to select the original file that I have here. It's this one. And when I select import, it's going to give me some options here. And this file origin option, this is the text encoding format. So you might notice as you scroll down through here, this is what you would expect to see. Some very different languages and some different things. And it by default thinks that it's a Windows ANSI encoding, but I happen to know that what this is, and sometimes you have to play around with this and figure out what it is and try some different options. This happens to be a UTF-8 Unicode encoding, so I'm going to select that. But I also need to come up, because I'm importing data, and I need to tell it this is a CSV file where there are commas in between each cell. So if I open this file in something other than Excel, I would just see a comma between each section here, and you can actually kind of see it down in the text down here. So I need to tell it that this is a delimited file. When I hit next, it lets me choose this option of comma. It doesn't matter if tab is selected also. I just need to make sure that comma is selected, and you can see here that now it separates these values the right way between columns. And I might even be able to find here where it is detecting the right characters. And so I can hit next or finish. I'm going to hit finish, and I want to start importing it here in cell A1. Now it's going to take just a second to import this data to be in some kind of workable format in Excel, as though I have just downloaded this, as though I've just opened this inside of Excel. So here's the data that we have after it's loaded. Now I'm going to change the column width here. Just select the columns that have some values in them. I'm just going to narrow all these so I can see everything a little better. I want to be able to look at my data. Here we go. So I need to kind of go down to the next level. It looks like everything imported okay. Everything looks right that way. But now I need to look at what is the data that I have. So first I had to make sure that the data opened correctly. Now I need to know what is the data that I have. And is this all data that's relevant to what I want to do? So I need to sort of inspect here. I see winery, the wine variety, the title. This is the title of the review as it's posted on the page, which for the most part corresponds to the wine. I think that might be useful for me. The Twitter handle, I don't know that I want the Twitter handle of the reviewer or the name. There could be useful in certain areas, but I don't think it's useful for me. And I see a lot of blank values in these regions. Now, I have country, that makes sense. Province, as we look down this is maybe in Sicily, in Italy, or in California, so that's state in the United States. And then regions here, this is like Napa Valley, and then Napa. It's a little more specific than probably what I want. And I may or may not want province, but I'll leave it there for now. I do want price. I do want, this is points, this is the score of the wine. The designation happens to be information that the winery has said, so it might be like a reserve wine. It's just some kind of description that the winery has given to the wine. I'm not concerned with that. And then the description is a description of the taste of the wine or of the wine itself, which probably isn't relevant here in what I might want to do. But you could run some text analysis on that and learn some interesting things about different wines. If you're looking for maybe light wines or fruity wines, then you could keep that in there if that's something that you need, but I don't need it. And then this first column here, these are index values. So Excel doesn't really need these because Excel has A3, and it doesn't need to know that this is index value 1 for this. That's going to be used with other data tools. So I'm going to select all these, and I'm going to delete these values. Oh, doesn't like something that I did here. So I'm gonna delete all these values that I really don't think I need. There we go. Okay, so now that these are gone, this seems like it's much more usable information to me, and I still have some blank values in here, and I don't really like this. I need to be able to handle my data in some sort of way that this is, if I'm trying to take an average or something, this might throw it off, and there are a number of tools, especially if you're doing something like pivot tables in Excel, that are really not going to like these blank values, so I need to handle them somehow. There are different ways in data of handling blank values. For example, you could fill in the average price for any of these blank prices. You could put in zeros, although in price, that's probably not something that you want to do. So what I want to do in this case is I want to take all of these blank rows and I want to say, okay, I'm just not going to count this wine. I want to delete this value, but one way that I might think to do that is to manually sort through and find any rows that have, but this is 130,000 rows. It's going to take me forever to do. I don't want to do it that way. So we might think, okay, what if I just come and I sort or filter this? Well, that might kind of work, except then I have to do it once for every column to make sure that there aren't blank values in each column. Excel has a tool for this. If we come over to Find and Select, and then I hit Go to Special, I can have it select any blank cells, and it's going to search through this entire document. Now, I'm not going to hit OK right now, because even though it's much faster than doing it by hand, 130,000 rows is a lot. So I happen to have basically the same data right here, but this is just the first 10,000 rows. So I've just deleted off the last 120,000 rows. And I'm going to run this same thing here. So select, go to special, and it's going to select all the blank values here. And you can see up here is the reference for where it's looking. And it does this much faster. So it's done. It's selected all of those blank cells, which is exactly what I wanted it to do, except that now it has the blank cell selected. I want to delete the entire row. So I'm going to come up to delete. I can't just do this with my keyboard. I'm going to delete sheet rows, and when I select this, it deletes any of those rows where a cell is selected. So now all of the empty cells are gone from this. Those entire rows are gone, and this is the data that I want to look at. Okay. So that's what I have here. So this was the 10,000 rows. Now this document that I have open here, this is all 130,000 rows. That's removed any empty values. The text is formatted the way I want it to be. And now I need to start really digging in more. And I might think like, okay, everything's fine, everything's done. But there's a couple other things that I want to do. One of those is that right now Excel sees all of this. If we come up to this number section on the ribbon here, it sees all of these as just a general format. I know that this is a price. Right now Excel doesn't. If I come up and I format this as a currency, Excel is going to put this in a dollar value. I can get rid of the decimals if I want. These are all whole dollar values. And points, I want to tell Excel that this is a number. And I'm going to get rid of the decimal values there too, because I don't need them. There aren't any decimals in this data set. And now Excel knows that these are numbers, and this is really going to help Excel in some of the processes that I might go through if I start analyzing this data. And there's one other thing that I want to check on here. We might think like, okay, everything's fine, everything's good, I've got all my data, I've kind of sorted it and cleaned it, so let's start finding conclusions. Let's just jump right to the end, but you really have to investigate your data. And that's the thing that I have to do right now. One way to do that is to start making some visualizations. You have to spend time with data to know what it is and what it isn't. I'm going to come over here to points, and I might wonder, what are these points value? I said earlier that these are on a range from 80 to 100 points, for 80 being a poorer wine and 100 being just an outstanding wine. And I want to know, where is the distribution of my data here? How many different prices are there? How many different point values? So I'm going to just make a couple graphs here. I'm going to come to price, and I'm going to insert, I can go to recommended chart, but we might notice that Excel doesn't like this big of data sets, so I have to kind of select this manually, and I just want a histogram. I just want to see where are the prices of all of these. When I hit OK here, this might be about what I expect, but I mean, this goes out really far, so I'm going to set an overflow bin here, and it kind of puts it manually at 158. So this goes up to $158, and anything over $158 all gets dumped into this bin right here. So see this distribution. I might find something interesting here, but this doesn't tell me a whole lot right now. The other thing that I want to look at is points. Let's look at what the distribution of points looks like here. So I'm going to, I could come to recommended charts. I can select manually, but this is an easy way for me to know that I'm getting to the histogram section here. I'm going to import a histogram, so the same type of distribution for point values. And as I look at this, I see basically a general bell curve, which is what I would expect to see. A lot of wines with sort of middle values, fewer ones that are really good, fewer ones that are really bad. But there's something really strange happening right here. As I hover over these values, I might see that wines with 88 points, there are 16,000 of them. And there are about that many with 87 points. There are 15,761. But wines with 89 points, there are only 11,300 of these. And back up to 90 points, 1 point more than that, there are over 14,000. There's something interesting going on with my data set. There seems to be, possibly, I would have to go back and investigate, but there seems to possibly be something missing with these values with a rating of 89 points. Maybe there's just something about giving a wine an 89-point rating that reviewers don't like to do. Maybe there's some psychology going on in here, I don't know. But I probably want to investigate this and look at maybe the initial raw data and see if maybe these values get dropped more often for some reason, if maybe there are missing prices or missing countries or provinces, because maybe something happened in collecting data. Maybe there's something on the website where these were scraped from, where these values just happen to get dropped more often, and I don't want that to throw off my data. So what we see here is that sometimes just some initial inspection, visual inspection, will lead to other ways that the data is not as clean as we think it is. When we're cleaning data, to just go back over this, we want to make sure that it opens the right way, that the text is what it needs to be. We want to make sure that once the text is what it needs to be, that we've looked at what data do we have and what data can I maybe get rid of. And then we looked at what empty values do I have here, NA values, that I need to drop so that I really have cleaner data without missing values that might mess something up. I format columns in a format that might help Excel do things a little more for me, or might help some charts that I make a little later on that I don't have to add labels to them manually. And then I looked at, is there anything strange about my data? Once you've gone through that process, then you can really start to look at, what does this data tell me? What's the story that this data has? Because this is wine data. There's got to be something interesting that I could learn here. There's got to be some wine that I would want to try here, or some region of the country, of the world, that I would say, hey, if I want to try some interesting wines, this might be a place to go. You have to make sure that you have the right data before that you have enough of your story, enough of the elements of the story, before you start trying to draw conclusions about what the moral of the story is. So that's very briefly importing and cleaning data in Excel. Thank you.